Right, I've got an idea for a new product which I'm very excited about. I thought I would show you the inspiration first. So I went to a makers market just before Christmas in Stockport, and when I was there I met well, she's a shepherdess and fibre artist, I guess you'd say. She literally at a farm, don't know, like I could walk there in an hour maybe. It's in the next village along, so in Chindley, this is in the Peak District. And she had on her table various products with her, all with her own wool, but she also had carded bats of fibre. And I was very excited when I saw, I was going to say when I saw this bat, this is just what's left of it. So I'll try and show you. So this is a carded bat of Leicester Longwool. I found this little bit here to show you. Oh my god, is that the staple length? Let's see. Okay, that's the staple length. That's crazy. That's like 8 inches. That's mad. So yeah, I've never played with a long wool, like a, you know, anything with locks like this. So I thought, oh well, this would be a really fun experiment. So yeah, so I got this bat. I think it was about 250 grams, something like that. And I did some playing around. So it's a bit of a mess. So I played around with kind of just making just this kind of 2-ply, quite low twist. I say that like I had much control over it. I found it pretty wild trying to spin with, because it's so long and it's such a sort of like a really tough fibre. It felt like horsehair or something trying to draft it. It was really, you know, where it hadn't kind of completely detangled in the carder, you kind of had these like real big knots that I felt like I was having to kind of just like yank through to draft it. But what I got at the end of it was these 2 gorgeous skeins. I just think it's amazing. It's so lustrous as well. And then when I washed them, these curls just kind of like just came back out again. So I don't know if I can show you. Can you see how like loose the sort of the plying is, like, but I don't know, I got quite excited. It just feels like it needs to go into a project where you can really see that kind of, you know, the curls and the locks. So yeah, so I sort of paused and was thinking about what to do with it. It's not really the softest. I mean, it's pretty soft, but I don't think I want it next to skin. I think it's, I don't know whether it's just the fibres are just, because you talk about the diameter of the fibres, so the micron count. If they're bigger, I think that's one of the things that can then feel coarser. So I feel like that's maybe what I'm feeling here a little bit. But the second piece of inspiration came from, I'm gonna have to check her name, hang on. Right, I found her and I'm hoping that I can do her name justice. She's Swedish. Kerstin Neumüller, I think. I'll put her like details so you can find her yourself. So I don't know how I stumbled upon her. This is, you know, one of these things when you're just browsing around Instagram and maybe somebody shared something. But yeah, she's sort of all-round crafter, works with fibre and wood, which is probably why I then kind of like sort of just went through all of her posts and stuff. But one of her projects, sort of recent projects that really caught my imagination, was she did a project which was actually funded, which I just is very exciting that you can get funding for these kinds of things, or at least in Sweden you can. She wanted to play around with a sheep wool where she used the different properties of the fleece. This was a double layered fleece. So she wanted to use like the outer parts of the fleece to create a sort of a water repellent side to a woven fabric, and then use the soft downy inner layer of the fleece to create then a softer next to skin kind of layer of fabric. So yeah, so she was basically making a type of double cloth, but it was using Overshot method. So the idea being that you do this plain tabby weave with one of the types of fibre, and then you, in between picks, or a number of picks, you then add in another fibre, and it sort of creates then 2 layers. And so the reason why these two things then kind of merged in my head to create this idea was that this wool in my mind, you don't want to weave a really close set on it, because you won't be able to see all of those curls. It'll kind of just flatten it all out. But if you then weave it really loose, you're getting a really loose fabric. I didn't want to knit with it. I didn't think that would show it off that well. But so I liked the idea of doing this overshot cloth. So I'd have like a background layer of weaving, which it wouldn't be hand spun, because it would take too much weaving time. But to have this then as my overshot, so that you could just have these like streaks of this. So you've got stable cloth, but then you've got the beauty of this going over the top. I'm hoping that makes sense. So then I was obviously thinking, well, what is the actual product, rather than just thinking about a piece of cloth, what am I aiming for? And I'd been thinking a lot about cushions, because I just think it's another piece of decoration that you can kind of actually sort of think about adding to your home. Like, you can never have too many cushions, right? So yeah, I want to try making a cushion with this as an overshot. So it is, I was going to say Tuesday morning. It's already 11 o'clock. I've spent quite a long time just having breakfast and coffee. But yeah, I've got the next 2 days. I'd really like to have done some more sampling to try and figure out the set, the right combination, what to use as the background, and then hopefully sort of weave a first prototype, basically. And if I can make it work for this wool, then it means I could then look for more of these kind of like long wool curly lock kind of fleeces, and sort of get some interesting effects out of it. So we better get started. Okay, I'm down on the floor. I'll show you what I'm looking at in a minute. I was doing some sampling last night, basically, on my rigid heddle loom, just to try and get some quick results. So let me turn you around and we'll have a look at what I've got so far. So I really need to work on my sampling system, because this took me so long just to warp up at this set, and I had no idea what length warp to go for. I wasn't sure how far I was going to go with my experiments, but yeah, this is far from ideal, so don't worry about that. What we've got here on the warp is the West Yorkshire Spinners Jacob's Fleece DK. It's a fibre that I've used a fair amount so far with my weaving, because it's a non-superwash British wool, and it's all Jacob's, so I quite like knowing that, like, if I'm gonna buy something for a warp, yeah, I kind of want to buy the best I can. So that's what's on the warp. We are on, I think it's about 12 ends per inch on the set. So that's just sort of, that's the first go, basically. I've done, this is then a little bit of plain weave using the same fibre, so this is the same as the warp. And then I started to play around then with this overshot. So this first section here is using that wool I've just shown you. I'm putting it over 3, under 1, in between 2 picks of plain weave. So this is kind of how you get this idea that you've got a solid base fabric. So I'm like feeling it from underneath, and like it just feels like plain weave almost. And then you have this sort of much thicker weft to make this sort of secondary layer of fabric. It was more evident then up here. I decided that here it was, because of the sort of the scale of the locks, like sort of the size of the curls, having it going over 3 at this set just wasn't doing it justice. Like it's quite nice. Maybe I'll play with it for something else. It's not what I've got on my head for this cushion. So then I went into these couple of picks here, where I went, I think, over like 5 warps or something, and that I'm finding quite exciting. I think that's kind of the right sort of scale and proportion. I then just kind of got a bit wild and sort of, you know, went over, I don't know, 8 or something. But I think that's too much, and I think, like, I don't want it to be impractical, you know, in terms of like possibly getting, you know, jewellery caught on it or something like that, or kind of it loosening itself up. So that was last night's experiments. So I need to have a little bit of a think now if there is more experiments that I want to do with this set, or whether I want to change the set. There is also another yarn that I was thinking about for the warp, so I'm not sure whether to sample with that. So I just thought I'd show you the warp options. So this is the Leicester Longwool. See, it's quite a creamy wool, you know, rather than like a bright white, which is why I thought it worked quite well with the Jacobs. This is the West Yorkshire Spinner Jacobs on the right. This is my other option that I've used on quite a lot of my pieces so far, which is from Woolly Knits. This is their, okay, what's that? Light grey natural. So yeah, I suppose it is a grey rather than a cream. But yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't know if it's worth sampling, but this is a fingering weight, whereas this is DK. So I think in terms of like creating that cloth behind the cushion, like I really like, see this section here, I really like how dense and then squishy this I think is going to become after washing, and it sort of falls out a little bit, whereas I'm going to have to work a lot harder. If I use the fingering weight, I'd probably have to then have way more ends, or I'd have to hold it double. So I think maybe it's just try it with the Jacobs, with the West Yorkshire Spinners first. Okay, I've just done a fresh little bit of samples, just over the top of that, just because I wanted to solidify some some thoughts. So this is going over 5 and kind of stacking them on top of each other, which is kind of taking the idea of what I did there, but just making it bigger. That was over 3. That's over 5, which I think is really nice. Then here I then alternated where that 5 was going, so that it kind of then alternated. Which I also like, which is making me think maybe it would be fun to do a sample cushion first, where I play with different sort of types of overshot, because it also doesn't need to be this dense. So this is with 2 picks of plain weave in between each overshot. But imagine what this would look like. Oh, we don't need to imagine, I could do it. Okay, I'm going to do that now. Let's do 4 picks between each overshot instead. Okay, please excuse how badly I've warped this up, and that's why we're getting this this line here. It's because I did a really rough and dirty job at warping up. You can see that I just wound the warp on without kind of trying to keep it consistent. So yeah, ignore that. But what you should be looking at is this was 4 picks between, although I think I may have done only 3 on one point, but anyway, it kind of gives you an idea of the difference between a 4 pick and a 2 pick. You kind of then get these more kind of like pronounced lumps. But yeah, do you know what? I think this is just telling me that I'm gonna just do a sample, you know, where I'll do like sort of imagine a sort of a stripe like this and then a stripe like that. And kind of then that'll inform, you know, for future cloths. I then might just choose to do all of it like this or something like that. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty excited by that. I don't know if you can tell how the effect that I'm getting in terms of how 3D and raised it is. I just think that'll be such a nice texture for a cushion. So yeah, pretty excited about that. So I think next up I need to just have a bit of a think about set, because I won't be doing this on the rigid heddle. This is not my favourite loom at all. I find it quite awkward to work with. So I will be using the 4-shaft table loom that's downstairs. So I just need to have a bit of a think about set, because I think the set on that is different. So let's go figure that out. Right, so I've just dug out the 2, well, I've actually got 3 reeds for the big loom downstairs. So, and handily, they actually say on them. So I think that's the 12 ends per inch. And this one, which is what I've been using mainly, is 10 ends per inch. So this one, the 12, is, I think, what I've been working on the rigid heddle, which is the set that I really quite like, because I'm not going to line the cushion, or I've got a working theory of not lining it. If we want a really close set, basically, to make a really dense tight cloth. So I'm very tempted to go with the 12 and put that on the table loom. Right, so the loom that I was referring to that was downstairs is now upstairs. We needed to bring it upstairs really because it was taking over the living room. So yeah, it is now up in the wool room. I've just tried to change the reed. So this is what was on it, which was the 10 ends per inch, and this is our 12 ends per inch. But the height of this reed is much taller than this one. So even though there is an adjustment here to have this pin at 2 different places, it's just underneath that bit, I can't actually, it's like it's too tall to then be able to screw the nut back on the top. So I don't think I'm going to be able to use this 12 ends reed on this loom. So that means we're back on 10 ends per inch for the cushion. But I think it's still going to be alright. So yeah, let's give this a go. Okay, I've just been trying to figure out how I'm gonna actually do the cushion. I really wanted to try and keep it as simple as possible, so I didn't want to use zips, but I did want to be able to get in and out of the cushion rather than like sealing it up. So what I decided was I was going to basically do like an envelope style cushion. You know, it's always like, you know, like a pillowcase in terms of it's sort of on the back side, although you could make it the front facing side, make a feature out of it, but you overlap your fabric, and I'm going to put buttons on it. So I've made a paper version to try and help me to like figure out the numbers. So this is my cushion. So in my mind, it's like a long rectangle of fabric that you then fold in, and then they overlap here, and then the buttons and buttonholes go there. So that was the other thing, is as I was quite excited about being able to weave the buttonholes into it rather than having to like make buttonholes afterwards. So I thought that was an interesting challenge as well, to basically weave the slits into the fabric. So yeah, so I've made my little model so that I can try and figure out yeah, what length of fabric does this need to be? What do I need like in terms of overlap? Thinking about how I'm going to finish it. Everything I've woven so far, I've basically just like knotted and just made a fringe with everything. But I don't really like the idea of the fussiness of having fringe on this cushion. So I'm going to try and basically do like a double folded hem. Yeah, double folded hem. So I've had to put that into my little model as well. So I'm just going to basically allow like 2 centimeters to turn that twice. I am wondering where the buttons are going to get sewn on, whether to have to fold that hem up so it's a taller hem, so that when I sew the buttons on, I'm sewing the buttons through 2 layers of fabric than 1 layer of fabric. But I haven't decided on that, so I think I'm basically just going to weave extra length, and then I can decide how much to turn under, and we could just lose a bit of fabric if we need to. I've got no idea what's going to happen with shrinkage, so again I think we're just going to have extra fabric. I decided I want the whole thing to end up being like a 40 centimeter square. That's based on I picked up a cushion I've already made. This I think was like 35 or something centimeters square, and I think we just want to go a bit bigger than that. So I'm going to go 40 centimeters squared. So I'm just going to do my maths to basically work out what length of fabric I need to weave, which can then tell me how much warp I need, so that we can then actually start planning the warp and get that sorted out. Okay, are you ready for some really, really quick maths? So this is my cushion opened out. This is the entire length. So I've kind of worked out, I've got like the tie-on waist. They've got double hem. They've got one of the back panels, the front panel, the other back panel, and a hem, and then the back beam waist. So that got me to 145 centimetres of loom. Then worked out if we're on 10 ends per inch, we want it to be about 40 centimetres wide. We're on 160 ends then. I just wanted to work out how much warp did I need. So I times 160 by 145 and get 232 metres of warp, which the Jacobs gives you 225 meters per 100 grams, and I've got about 150 grams of the warp, so I've got enough warp to do it. I'm just not going to do it in a very efficient way because I think I will just warp up for one cushion and see what happens, because I don't actually have enough warp to do 2 cushions. So I think I am ready to prepare the warp, but I think I might just break for lunch and just make sure that I haven't forgotten anything, or like can think of a slightly better tactic, because it takes me so long to warp up a loom that I'm a bit like, is it really worth it for one cushion? So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm gonna have some lunch and think about it.